I hope I didn't forget anybody from Silver Star. Once again, thank you. I get to perform on this stage 5 nights a week, and it's really a privilege to be up here and perform in this amazing space. So if this is your first time here, welcome. It feels like my second home, and so it felt natural to be able to do this here at the Silver Star. So, okay, let's do this. This is a tribute to my father, Bernard Curry. Bernard Curry born April 24th, 1935, and he passed March 11th, 2024, and he was a beloved music educator in Arizona. I think if Dad had passed maybe like 20 or 25 years ago, we would have probably had a more traditional funeral and burial and all that good stuff. But over the last 20 years of me touring and playing on cruise ships and being away from town, every time I would come back, Dad and I would get together, and we became very close over the last 20 years. And we would sit down and watch old TV shows and hang out. And at that time, we had several discussions about funerals. Dad hated funerals. He did not like funerals. He said the only 2 times in your life where the most important people to you are all together, and that's your wedding and your funeral, and you can't hang out at either time. So there were several times when he expressed to me that when he's gone, he just wants people to get together and share stories and memories. So that's what we're gonna do today. Is that okay? All right. And as long as I hold it together, then we're in good shape. All right, let's go to slide number 2. That's Dad as a baby with his mother. Nard was born in Franklin, Arizona, a suburb of Duncan, Arizona, to Grover Cleveland Curry and Eva Mae Curry. And he was the youngest of 12 children. All preceded him in death. The sisters were Pauline, Thelma, Helen, Sammy, and Faye. And his brothers were Marshall, GC, Charlie, Pat, Ted, and Don. And you can go to the next one. Dad's mother named him Ben Nard Curry after a distant relative. But the doctor made a mistake on his birth certificate and put Benjamin Bernard Curry extended each one of those names. And so that was always a thing with him. Like, he always was called by his middle name then, Bernard, or most people called him Nard. Music was very important to the Curry family. That was my dad's dad, my grandpa. Grover Cleveland Curry was, among other things, a violin maker. His dad owned and operated a lumber mill, and he was truly a jack of all trades, a real vagabond. And in his life, he taught school in Texas, was a highway engineer in Kansas, a violin maker, a violin player and teacher, and a string repairman. Dad's mother told the story of when he was repairing a cello once on a kitchen table, and he put Dad inside the cello while he worked on the rest of the instrument. And his dad also ran a fluorspar mine in New Mexico. And it was while they were living in Deming, New Mexico, that his dad was killed in a mining accident in Gila, New Mexico, about 50 miles north of Deming, where they were living. And Grover Cleveland Curry died in January of 1941 at the age of 54. So my dad's mom was left a widow at the age of 45 with 7 of her children still living at home. And they moved back to Duncan, where Eva Mae Curry worked as a cook and a waitress, and she eventually leased and ran her own restaurant in Duncan. Those are the brothers. Yeah, so then World War II happened, and during the next 5 years of their lives, all the boys except for Marshall, who had a medical deferment, and Dad, who was 6 years old when the war started, they all went into the service. GC in the South Pacific, and Charlie, who I'm named after, in Germany. Pat, Ted, and Don all joined the Navy. And then Dad's mother, my grandma, had a small banner in the window of her home and her restaurant with 5 blue stars. And she was very fortunate. She said that none of those turned to gold. The gold star means they killed in action. So they all survived the war. During the war, my dad was left alone with his mother. So he was the youngest of 12 kids, but he was alone with his mom for a long period of time. So it was almost like he was an only child for a while. And they became very close. Dad also had a full run of the town of Duncan. He would end up in pool halls. He would end up in the bars. Who knows where he would end up, but he had full reign, and they all knew who he was. And his mother, all he knew she had to do was just make a phone call, and he'd be back. After the war, Pat, Don, and Ted all attended ASC of Tempe, which ended up being ASU. They did it on the GI Bill. So Nard and his mom also moved to Tempe. They picked up and moved to Tempe, and they got a house where they all lived. And Dad attended Tempe Elementary School at that time. And then as a freshman, Tempe High School. And at that time, he started playing trombone in elementary school. And he got pretty good, pretty quick. That's Dad's brother, Pat Curry. Brother Pat Curry got married to Lorraine Curry. Her nickname was Chick. They were very active in college, and Pat was the band manager of the Sun Devil Band. During that time, Pat outfitted Dad with a Sun Devil marching band uniform when he was in 8th grade. And he attended all the games, he played in the stands. And Dad was the envy of all his friends. He was at every game. After Dad's 8th grade year, Pat and Chick were hired by the ASU summer music camp, which was in Phoenix at that time, to run the boys' dormitory. Pat and Chick ran the boys' dormitory, and guess what? My dad followed and stayed in the dormitory and got to experience that camp as the youngest member of the camp. And it really instilled to him this sense that he really wanted to become a band director. Pat's first teaching job, by the way, Brian and Roberta are here. Brian is Pat's son. Pat's first teaching job was in Snowflake, Arizona. It was a really coveted job. That band had a very good reputation at the time and still does. So again, Dad moved with his mother to Snowflake to live with Pat. So they moved up and followed Pat. Here's a little hint. This isn't the last time that my dad's going to follow Pat. So they moved in with Pat and Snowflake, and Pat got a built-in cook and a house cleaner, my Grandma Curry, and that made my grandma's life much easier at that time. And my dad was playing trombone pretty well, so Pat recruited him to be in the Snowflake band. He got a trombone player in the deal. This is a picture of Dad, and he was the vice president of the band, and standing on the other side is David Gibson. David played in the band, and they were best friends. Dad, at that time, he played in the band, he played basketball, he was starting guard for the basketball team, and he became best friends with David Gibson, a trumpet player. David is my middle name. David and Dad were great friends throughout their lives, and their families were very close. And it's great to see Dave's widow, Donna, here with Steve. Say hi. And I'm sure that I think Lori and Kent and Scott are on the Zoom call, probably. Later in life, they lived in Flagstaff, and they didn't live too far away from each other. And we used to spend a lot of time together, mostly doing home improvement projects of all sorts of, and we would go fishing and spend a lot of time together. So our families were very close. So this was when they met. Now there's Dave and Donna. Okay, go to the next one. Dad graduated from Snowflake High School in 1953, and then at that time, right when he graduated, Pat accepted a job at Sunny Slope High School in Phoenix. And guess who followed him? Yeah, Dad made the journey. And after he graduated, he attended ASU as a music education major. And while Pat was teaching at Sunny Slope, he recruited Susan Kleinschmidt to play trumpet in his Sunny Slope band. There's Dad in the ASU band. In 1955, Nard was asked by Pat to learn how to play viola because he needed a viola player in the Phoenix Youth Symphony, which he had just started. He also recruited Susan Kleinschmidt as well. They played brass instruments, but he convinced her to learn how to play viola. And they sat next to each other in the Phoenix Youth Symphony and became stand partners. You probably know what happened next. Nard and Sue fell in love and married on December 22nd, 1956. And Pat started it all because he recruited him to play viola. Some people think he hooked him up. We don't know. After graduating from ASU, Nard began his teaching career in Eloy, Arizona at Santa Cruz Valley High School in 1957. And on March 7, 1958, in Eloy, Arizona, daughter Cathy Curry was born. Dad was offered the band director job at Tempe High School not long after that, in 1959, where he also studied for his master's degree at ASU. He received his master's degree in music education in 1961. And on April 11th, 1962, I was born. And that looks a lot like my son when he was born. During the 1962-63 school year, Bob Miller was hired as Dad's assistant band director at Tempe High School. We'll get back to Bob in a bit. A couple of years earlier, in 1960, Pat had accepted a job at ASC of Flagstaff, which was eventually going to be NAU, and he accepted the job as orchestra conductor of the ASC of Flagstaff Orchestra. But while Pat was still in the Phoenix area, in the Sunny Slope, he started the Arizona All-State Band and Orchestra Festival, among other things. And he was also named Teacher of the Year in 1965 by AMEA, Arizona Music Educators Association, and Arizona Band and Orchestra Directors Association. He was at the beginning of all of that. And both Dad and Pat are lifetime members of the Music Education National Conference, MENC. And that picture behind you is some of the greatest directors of that era, all standing all next to each other. All right, let's go. There's Dad. So it only made sense that when the band directing job opened in Flagstaff, Arizona, Dad applied and was given the job, and again, followed Pat to Flagstaff. All right, next one. This is Cathy and I. Growing up, we lived one street over from Pat, Chick, and their two kids, Brian and Barbara. And I hope Barbara is on our Zoom. call. I spoke to her recently, and we were very close. Our families were very close, and we spent a lot of weekends over at the Curry family, over at Uncle Pat's house. And Chick, they enjoyed having people over at the house and entertaining, and the family used to get together and play cards and dominoes. And at that time, also Grandma Curry was living with them again, and we spent a lot of time with each other. So our families are forever connected. All right, thanks. It's hard to see him, but that's Bob Miller. And so we're going to come back to Bob for a bit. After Dad left Tempe High School, Bob was given the job, and soon afterwards was hired by Mesa Community College to start the band and jazz band programs. Bob Miller hired Don Bothwell to run the band. From there, Grant Wolf was hired. The MCC band program became one of the top music schools in the nation. From there, Bob was hired by ASU to start the jazz program at ASU in 1970 and brought the program to national prominence. It was one of the only 4 jazz degree programs were in the nation at that time. ASU, University of Miami, University of North Texas State, and University of Northern Iowa. Dad and Bob remained close friends during that whole time. And when Bob started the ASU music camp at Camp Tonazona, he got my dad to help run it. And our family loved the ASU music camp, and it was always something that we looked forward to go to both ASU and NAU summer music camps. That brings me to the next. That's Mr. Coach Robert Fleming. When Coach Robert Fleming and Dr. Strange came to ASU, they took over running the camp with Dad. And in the 70s and 80s and 90s, Dad and Coach Fleming were great friends and colleagues. I spoke with Coach yesterday, and he's unable to attend here, but he sends his love. And if you're listening, Coach, we really, really love you. And everybody say hi to Coach. Okay, back to Bob Miller. Bob and Dad's friendship were very important to him. I spoke with Bob just a couple of days ago, and it was great hearing him talk. Bob developed one of the first jazz degree programs, like I said. He went from ASU to Stephen F. Austin, and then he went to University of Idaho for 17 years, and he developed the Lionel Hampton School of Music and ran the now famous Lionel Hampton Jazz Festival. Dad was so proud of all of his success, and he knows that it all started with him at Tempe High School. And if you're listening, Bob, we love you too. Everybody say hi to Bob Miller. Bob's in the hospital right now. We hope he get out soon, okay? All right, let's go to the next one. In Flagstaff, Dad spent 4 years leading the band at Flagstaff High School. And when Coconino High School opened up, Dad started the band program there, and he wrote the fight song. And he developed the very first successful program there. He was also his own feeder. He taught at East Flagstaff Junior High School, which later became Mount Eldon Middle School. Dad's marching band shows were always a hit. I remember in the summertime, we were always listening to the Bill Moffitt band arrangements and selecting songs for the next year. And he would have these field grids before computers made where everybody went in the marching band field. We used to sit down. He used to show me. We used to do it together and map out where everybody went. Say, okay, you're going to go here from here to here. And then it was like making an animated story or some kind. And so he had those grids, and he would obsess with those. And we would sit in his office and just do that for hours and hours and hours, especially during the summer. He made these great shows without ever having any before school rehearsals. Everything he did for marching band was in the regular classroom time. This allowed more students to be a part of the band. And he always had cheerleaders, football players, and they played in the band. At halftime, the football players that were in band would take their helmets off. They'd go set them down. They'd go run, get their instruments, and get in line. And he'd be like, let's go, get in line. And the cheerleaders were all with us too. And they marched in their uniforms. Bubba Gantner, if you're online, Bubba became a wonderful athlete and friend of the family. So hello, Bubba. Dad was loved by his students. His band always had a balanced sound and he played in tune. We're hearing it, his bands just before he started. All of his students, including me, loved being in the band room. Before school, lunch, and after school, we were always there. That was the place to be at junior high and at high school. There was always somebody in that room. Oh yeah, Pat. Remember him? Let's get back to him. Because during all of this time, Pat became the music department head at NAU and led the NAU summer music camp during the golden years of that camp. I'm just going to mention a couple names. I'm sorry if I miss anybody. Judy Conrad, who's here. Larry Conrad, Joe Corral, right here. James Thompson, who I've been in touch with recently. I hope you're on the Zoom call. Hi, Jim. Ed Hoffman, Don Wolf, Grant Wolf, Paul Grimes, Bucky Steele, Joe Lloyd, Paul Godfrey, Clyde Decker, Charlie Wade, John Thrasher, Lewis and Frank Scott, Joe DeBartolo, Mary DeBartolo, Fred Forney, Clarence Shaw. We're going to get to you later. And if I missed anybody, I apologize. It was such an amazing community back there. And it was all because of him. The NAU Music Camp was where every really good musician wanted to learn throughout the Southwest United States and beyond. It was 2 weeks for junior camp and 2 weeks for senior camp, middle of July, and right around the first monsoon rain. In fact, we knew it by clockwork. As soon as we were registering for camp, it would rain. And Flagstaff until mid-August. That was back when schools didn't start until September. At its height in the mid-70s, each camp had over 800 students in all areas of music. They put on an opera. They had 2 symphony orchestras, 5 concert bands, 3 or 4 jazz bands. And the reason everybody wanted to study there was because Pat also ran the Flagstaff Festival of the Arts concurrently with the camp. He used professional musicians such as Joe and Judy, professional orchestra musicians from around the world. And he invited them, he got them into Flagstaff for their summer vacation. He brought them all together for a series of symphonic performances with top-notch talent, led by some of the greatest conductors, Isaac Solomon, Dennis DeCateau, Erwin Hoffman, and opera soloists such as Roberta Peters and Shlomo Manson, Daniel Heifetz, Francine Reed, and Claire Fisher, Brian Bromberg, Gary Foster, William Warfield. I mean, the list goes on and on. He brought them to Flagstaff. And that's how the camp got so big, because everybody wanted to be a part of this community, part of this summer festival in Flagstaff. It was so magical. And it was Pat and Chick that did it. It was Lorraine that wrote the grants. She was the one that organized it all. Pat directed it and put everybody into place and recruited everybody there. So who would follow in Pat's footsteps with that, you think? Nard Curry, of course. Dad taught at the NAU Summer Music Camp for 44 consecutive years. He did anything that Pat wanted him to do. But toward the end of his reign there, he was always the honor band director or the symphonic band director. He was doing low brass sectionals. And he wrote a music sight reading book with Bucky Steele for a class dedicated to sight reading. And he had the best sight reading class at NAU Music Camp. And it helped so many students get better at sight reading. He called it Step Up. I have it, and I'm going to republish it. I also taught at the camp and was equipment manager for a while. And I'm a proud member of the Potted Belt Society. The Royal Magnanimous Order of Potted Belts. I still have the hat. It was kind of a hall of fame of NAU Music Camp faculty, and I was so honored to be a part of that. For those of you who may not know the end of this story, the NAU Music Camp is now named the Curry Summer Music Camp at NAU. And I'm pretty sure that when they renamed the camp, and I'm not sure exactly who was involved in renaming the camp, but I'm positive that while it was named after Pat, that they had Dad in mind too. And the camp's still going strong. It's directed by Stephen Meyer, director of bands at NAU, and hopefully he's on the Zoom call. And he's really good. He's really good. He worked with some of my kids. I'm a band director at Coconino Middle School right now, and some of my kids made the all-state band. And Steve worked with my kids, and I was so impressed with what he did. He had so much enthusiasm, and he's really continuing the tradition of the Curry Summer Music Camp. It's currently just for high schoolers. It's June 4th through 8th. So if you're listening to this and you got a kid and you want to go to camp, send them to NAU Music Camp, the Curry Summer Music at NAU. And I'd like to announce right now, I didn't finish it today. I'm sorry I didn't finish it today, but please be looking for a GoFundMe campaign that I'm going to start in my father's name, a scholarship for a deserving student to go to the Curry Summer Music Camp. We're hoping we can get at least the goal. But the goal is 6,000, and that's about 10 years of where the current price is, but we'll see. So I'll have a link and a QR code, and I'll put it on this. I'm recording the Zoom call, so I'll put it in that and put it in the chat. You guys are welcome to chat up in the Zoom call. I'm not there right now to be a part of it, but I will go back and listen to it later. I'll also try to get it out on social media as soon as I can. Okay. There we go. Dad and Clarence. We need to talk about Clarence Shaw for a moment. Hi, Clarence. Thanks for coming. Clarence and Dad met in the Valley before they taught in Flagstaff. But then they both ended up teaching in Flagstaff. Clarence was, and probably still is, a brilliant violinist. I think if we just give him a violin right now, he'd just play. Clarence has an amazing gift and an amazing ear for music. His tone and vibrato is just so gorgeous. It's the most beautiful violin sound I've ever heard. He was concertmaster and assistant concertmaster of the Flagstaff Symphony for many years. I think for a while even principals, I think you were playing with the seconds for a while. He was always playing in the Flagstaff Symphony or the Flagstaff Festival Orchestra. And he was always really fun to be around, still is. And his string students loved him. And if any of you are on that call, hello to all of Clarence Shaw's former students. Clarence taught in Flagstaff until 2005, and when he retired, he moved to Sedona, and he had a motorcycle he would scoot around on, and he would drive up to Flagstaff on his motorcycle, and a milk crate full of music and his violin. I'm not sure how he did that, but he loved the motorcycle. And he would come down to Phoenix to visit Dad when Dad retired. You can go on to the next one. Around that time, he started playing golf with Dad. He would come down to Glendale every week, and they played Glen Lakes at sunrise. I mean, at the crack of dawn. And their routine included a brunch at the Greasy Spoon down the street. And they would joke and kid around and tell stories. They never used a cart. Never used a cart. We always walk. I'd be like, come on. I want a cart, but no, gotta walk. And then every time I was in between tours or coming through town, I would join them. We weren't any good, but we had fun. And it was more about spending time with each other. Next one. All right, now it's time to talk about Susan Evelyn Kleinston Curry. Where is she sitting? Oh, there she is right here in the front. Sue Curry was born in St. Paul, Minnesota on August 26, 1937. She also came from a large family, one of 8 kids. You've already heard the story of how my mother and father met. And those of you that know my mother know that she's one of the hardest working people that you will ever meet. There's the next one. She started making extra money in Flagstaff by babysitting over a dozen kids during the day while Dad was at work. Most of the kids were pre-K sons and daughters of teachers. Because of this, she started getting to know the teaching community. And with her previous experience in banking and as a teller in Phoenix, she helped start the Coconino Federal Credit Union in Flagstaff. It started in our house. People would come by, sometimes while there was still daycare going on, kids running around, and she'd pull out the ledger, and she'd take deposits, issue money, issue loans, take money. Eventually, she was the only employee. Eventually, the credit union got too big. And when we lived in our lower Patterson house, it took over our house. So we had to move into our upper Kendall house. And then she added city employees. She started gaining employees. And at the height, she ended up moving that place on 7th Avenue in Flagstaff, if you're familiar with it, the very much larger location with quite a few employees and a lot of members. Mom made a very successful career and was very active in the Credit Union National Association, CUNA, and she was CUNA Person of the Year in 1997, I believe. National award that she won. You can give her a round of applause for that. So then they both retired. After their retirement, they moved back into the valley and settled in Glendale, Arizona in 2001. And Mom and Dad supported each other in both careers. Somehow, with everything else going on in her life, Mom was at every band performance. We traveled, the family traveled to every away game. We were at every basketball pep band. And I played in the band from when I was 7 years old. I played up in the stands from 7 years old and would travel with the team, the sports team. Mom was the one that put together the tabulation sheets for solo and ensemble festivals and regionals. She would be the one in charge of gathering all the score sheets, double checking the scores. She was actively involved in every single aspect of Dad's career. And she was so good at organizing all of it. She was the best band mom you could ever ask on trips. John Willis is here. You know that. Where's Johnny? Over here. And any former students, we have some other former students of Dad. Raise your hand if you're a former student. Oh, so many. And you know how Mom had everything you needed on the band trips. They always looked for her if they needed something. Mom and Dad celebrated their 67th wedding anniversary this last December. And now I need a drink. So how did they do all this? Mom and Dad cultivated so many friendships with colleagues and everyone in Flagstaff. We could not go anywhere in Flagstaff without somebody coming up and saying hello to one of them, Mom and Dad. And they developed relationships with colleagues. I'm going to say a couple of them, and I apologize if I miss some. Debbie Rice, Russ Ashley, Doug Riddle, Chuck Bain, Bill Cummings, Jerry Korn, Jennifer Lynn, Anita Glenn, and so many more. He developed relationships with colleagues and music merchants. When he moved up to Flagstaff, he still had he developed relationships with Liederman's music. And Beth Liederman, who's a very good friend and musical partner with me, many different projects. If you're listening, Beth, hello. Otto Stein. We walked into Otto Stein when I was 7 years old because the first cornet that Dad gave me had a little accident at the top of the bleachers of Coconino's pet band basketball game, and it fell all the way to the bottom. And I loved trumpet so much, and I wanted one. And so my birthday, after that accident, he took me to Otto Stein's, and Otto Stein's gave me my first cornet. The Quicks music family, the Felton family, the Les Senior, Les Junior, Dave and Eric, if you're listening, hello. He developed those relationships and he kept those relationships, and so did Pat. Dad was so proud of his former students. He would follow you on Facebook when social media started to be a thing. Whether you knew it or not, whether you commented or not, he loved following the careers of his former students, whether they went into music or not. Let's talk about John Eder for a second. John is right here. Say hi to John. John was a student of Dad's at Coconino High School, graduated in 1976. And when Dad, after I went to Coconino High School and graduated, Dad left Coconino in what year? 81. So the year after I graduated. And John Eder continued the legacy of great bands at Coconino. Dad went full-time at Mount Eldon Middle School and loved teaching junior high band. And gave, at that time, I think he was probably feeling like he couldn't give enough to either one. So he just concentrated on Mount Eldon Middle School and started a festival, what was it called? Yeah, it was held at Sonawa every year, and it was just an amazing festival. And he poured his heart into that middle school program until his retirement. And like I said before, Mom and Dad retired and moved to Glendale in 2001. And they followed my musical adventures, and my going back and forth between teaching and playing music. Dad built a nice list of dedicated music students to tutor privately at that time from 2001. So when he retired, he didn't really retire. He substituted for Glendale Union School District, at one time a permanent sub, and then had a series of private students that he taught and poured his passion for music and music education to those students. And if any of you are listening on the Zoom call, hello, thank you so much for continuing Dad's interest in teaching and writing music and writing specifically for those students for different lessons, different techniques that he wanted them to learn. He traveled to their house and often stayed with one family of music students from their elementary school all the way to high school during that time. Again, developing relationships with those students and their families. Let's go to the next one. Okay, what brought Nard Curry joy? he was a completely dedicated band director. He enjoyed putting the festivals together. He enjoyed being on committees, and he was very active and involved in AMEA. Dad loved watching old TV shows. We watched TV together when we were kids, and we watched the moon landings on TV. We were well read. We were current on the news. Dad always valued education and diversity. He always read the paper, the Arizona Republic, the Daily Sun. He always did the LA Times crossword puzzle every Sunday, and he'd have it neatly folded near his chair, and he would work on it through the week. Dad was active in NEA and MENC and was a lifetime member. He always stayed on top of politics and advocated for public education and civil rights. He loved classic TV shows, and especially whodunits like Columbo and NCIS. He loved MASH and watched the entire series after he retired twice, all the way from start to finish. But his favorite show of all time was Monk. It was quirky. It was like this kind of quirky guy and solving cases, and he just loved those whodunits. He loved projects. He loved working with David Gibson on building a deck or a fence or tearing down a wall. And Mom was like, hey, let's tear down that wall. And Dad was like, okay, let's tear it down. Come on, Dave, let's come over here and tear down the wall. It never collapsed, the roof. They always had it figured out. He loved home improvement projects. He loved helping take care of them. And he loved visiting Cathy and her family. Cathy, whether it was in Vegas or in Show Low. And a huge thanks right now to my niece, Marilyn. Marilyn, say hi, stand up, do something. Marilyn took care of my mother and father at a time when they really needed it, and they moved to Show Low. That's where my mom is currently staying with Marilyn. All right, I valued my time together with my dad, and when I started working and going around traveling all over the world, there were times when I would come home from an exhausting over 24 plus travel day from Asia or wherever, and they would come pick me up from the airport, and they'd have my room all ready to go. Dad would lend me his car, and I'd live with them for a week or two before I'd go off for my next contract. I'd go golfing with Clarence and Dad. And I don't know what I would have done with them during those times in between tours. It was just home. I knew I had a home every time I came home. I had rooms set up. Those are the Curry boys. Mom and Dad were especially proud of my wife and son, Noy and Caden. And I'm so happy that Caden got to see his grandpa and spend time with him, and he knew him. And for a moment in time, mainly due to the COVID outbreak, that's how I ended up coming back. You know, just where we ended up all together again. So that was cool. The generosity of my parents extended not just to me, but to other families and friends. And I know that all of you listening online and here have experienced their generosity. Am I right? In the 70s, Gay Rodkey came to live with us, and we took care of Gay at a time she needed taken care of. And we became really close. Gay is our she was Mom and Dad's foster daughter at the time, and she's my forever foster sister. And forget the foster part, you're my sister, and she's online right now. So everybody say hi to Gay. All right, finally, thank you to all of Dad's former students. Whether you kept going in music or not, you found your own path, he loved you. I'm just going to say a couple of them, and obviously there was thousands of them, but John Willis is here. Chuck Morris, Chucky Baby, who many of you know him as Chucky Baby. Marianne Cook, where's Marianne? Right over here. Marianne has her own really very successful program at bassist Gilbert Chandler, bassist Chandler. Dad is so proud of you. He was so proud of everything that you did, and he's still proud of you right now. I'm proud of you. Your program is rocking. Marianne had did you have the most kids in Allstate? It had to be close. I mean, she's doing a great job. Mark Bothmer, I have to mention Mark. I don't know where he is, but we're the trio, man. Mark Rosema online. I know he's online. Hi, Mark. Terry Donovan, John Eater, Mark Strivings, and so many more. I know that you're here. He was all very proud. All right, and I'm still trying to do my part. Make him proud too. I get to play on this stage 5 days a week. I get to be in front of here. I'm the music director here. I get to sing. I get to play trumpet. I would have done that for you now. I don't think I would be able to hold it together. So if you want to see me, you got to come tonight. And you get a group rate if you want to come out tonight. And unfortunately, we're ending our season, this season, tomorrow. Is the last of our season. And we start from November, our main season, November to April. We have summer shows. Come see a summer show. We have occasionally some shows before the main part of our season. But once the main season starts, we have over 10 different shows, variety shows, and everything else under the sun. And I get to put those together. I get to arrange the music. I get to perform the songs on this stage with the most amazing, incredible musicians I've ever played with. And they're here tonight, supporting me. Mom and Dad saw all of the national tours I was on. I was on Broadway national tours. The last one was Pippin in 2017. And they were very proud of whatever success I was able to have in music. So thank you for your support, Mom and Dad. All right, so at this time, maybe you can show that last photo. Dad was very proud of my kids at Coconino Middle School also. So I got to shout out my kids. And it was really nice having my dad around as a teacher. You know, he was always supportive of me. He was always right there. If I needed anything, right there. I could just say, hey, Dad, I need an arrangement. Can you pop it together? I would arrange something, and he would go. I wasn't good at finale editing in the 90s, so I would do these big, huge arrangements for the Flag Symphony or whatever, and they didn't know how to make it look nice, and so I'd send it to Dad, and he would edit. He would spend hours and hours editing the music and making it look perfect. So that when it was given the first rehearsal to the symphony, that it looked like I did it, but he was the one that did all the making it look nice. I did the arrangement. And that, it was kind of a bummer when I got good enough at finale that I edited my own charts. I was like, oh no, I can't send it to Dad anymore. But he was always there. And I'm going to go through his sight reading book. I've got boxes and boxes of his music that he did, and sitting at Coconino, planning to go through that and make it part of my teaching. So thank you for coming out today. There's a microphone right here. If there's anybody that would like to share a story or would like to say anything you would like, microphone here. Jerome is here if you want to give him a mic, that's cool. And I love all of you. I thought I held it pretty good. I held it together pretty good up until the end here. But all right. Here you go. This is Marilyn.
I'm not used to microphones like my uncle. I'm Marilyn. I'm Cathy's daughter. I'm going to attempt to read what she told me to tell you guys about her father. So I'm gonna read it as if I'm her. When I was 5 years old, Dad started teaching me to play the violin, Suzuki method. Every morning before school, we spent 30 minutes together, and every week I went to Clarence Shaw's house for lessons. Dad and Clarence were my guys when it came to the violin. This was my foundation for all music and every instrument I would ever play. When it was Chuck's turn to learn to play the violin, he handed it back to Dad and said, "That's Cathy's violin. I don't want it. I want to play trumpet." And Chuck has lived and breathed trumpet all of his life. My dad's career was all about music, and Chuck has been the same, whether performing or teaching or arranging music. I'm so glad that Dad had a son that was exactly like himself in so many ways. Chuck has been my dad's pride and joy in many ways. Also, Chuck was Dad's sports buddy, every sport, but mostly football and basketball, in front of the TV together for every game, ever since Chuck was a little kid, making noise together in the living room the whole game. And Chuck, at 6 or 7 years old, with his miniature football field on the coffee table, matching what was happening on TV. It was serious business. Then as a grown man, sitting with Dad and watching games together, making noise together in the living room, and their #1 college team was ASU, always. As for me and my dad, we had a quiet connection, no talking necessary sometimes, just a half smile between us at times. We would stay up late when I was a teenager and watch Twilight Zone type movies, too scary for my mom. A life-changing thing Dad did for me. When I was in junior high, my dad came home one day and asked me if I wanted to be in his band. What? He said that he needed a Tempe player, and I said, sure, but I don't know how to play Tempe, he said. Well, the most important thing is being able to tune them perfectly, sometimes in the middle of a piece while the band is playing, which you'll easily be able to do. And you have excellent rhythm, which can't be taught, it's inside you. And you can sight read anything. I'll teach you how to use the mallets and get the best sound and resonation. My dad had never really verbalized my strong points musically like that, so that alone was a revelation to me, and I was all in. Dad having that confidence in me and asking me to be in his band was life-changing for me. I had only ever seen him directed from the back, on stage. Now I was being directed by him. I had never seen this side of him. He was brilliant, strict, fair, funny sometimes, expected excellence always, had kindness with his students, no singling out and embarrassing one person, scolded the whole band of the whole section. The percussion section got scolded a little more frequently since we were mobile back there. It was necessary to walk around the different areas to play different instruments or drums, but the boys horsed around on the way sometimes. I didn't horse around, but I smiled and thought they were funny, which gave them incentive to do it more often. In high school, we had marching band, and I learned that my dad tolerated marching band season as a necessary evil, but he still expected excellence. When marching season was over with, he was in such a good mood. We could get down to more serious music. Being in Dad's band was so fun for me. I learned to play every percussion instrument except snare with excellence. I was really great playing timpani and marimba and xylophone, thanks to Mrs. Cummings and piano lessons. I played with abandon and joy. Thank you, Dad, for thinking of me to join the band. Life-changing. When it comes to Dad and Mom's partnership, one day in the summer of 1956, Dad and Mom decided they wanted to elope. Mom was 18 and Dad had just turned 21. Dad had $8 and some change in his pocket, so it seemed like a good idea, and we headed north toward Flagstaff. When they got to the switchbacks near Oak Creek, no highway went straight to Flag at that time, They decided that maybe they didn't have quite enough money and nobody to marry them at 10 o'clock at night. So they turned around and came back, married the regular way a few months later. Dad was old school, given that his dad was born in 1885. So he provided for the family and brought home the big paycheck. Came home from work and was a presence in the house. Supportive to mom, but not doing wife stuff. Every afternoon after work, sorry, I lost my spot. Every afternoon after work, he sat down and read the rest of the morning paper from front to back, did the crossword puzzle. Then watched the early evening news and waited for a lovely dinner. Dad would get up and do manly stuff on the weekends. In the warm weather, he would mow the lawn every week, front and backyard. Every summer, Dad would take us out to the forest with Dave Gibson's family, and we would load our trailer full of wood to bring home for the winter. Back at home, Dad would chop it and stack it on the side of the house for the fireplace. I loved watching Dad chop wood. He was like a big, strong caveman. Dad didn't really do housework, just washing dishes with mom after dinner sometimes. On Saturdays, Chuck and I would try to clean the house before mom got up, dusting living room furniture very quietly, and then watching cartoons with the TV down low and eating bowls of cereal. Sometimes Chuck would crunch too loud, so I had to tell him to be more quiet, because when mom got up, the cartoon party was over. But when we moved to Tyndall, life changed. Mom started working outside the house, coming home later in the afternoon than Dad. For a while, Mom tried to be superwoman, coming home after work and then cooking dinner for all of us that were already home. Then one day she came home and had a discussion with Dad in the kitchen, because Dad had been home for hours and didn't start anything for dinner. Dad was bewildered because he didn't know that this was now his job. He was doing all the manly stuff just perfectly, but he adapted and started making manly stuff for dinner. In warm weather, he just put stuff on the grill outside on the deck. Chuck and I loved it. Like every day, it was the 4th of July. In cold weather, he did the best he could. Some stuff he cooked inside wasn't that great. We loved Mondays because he would heat up leftovers that Mom cooked on the weekend. And so he ended up making the conversion from a 1960s type husband to a 1973 type husband pretty well. Anytime that Mom and Dad had to have a discussion, it was in the kitchen. Dad didn't really feel the need to have discussions very often, so it was Mom that would let Dad know. He tried to just agree with her on whatever subject, but if he agreed too soon, Mom knew that she needed to talk more about it until he really understood. Sometimes it was a no-win situation for Dad, poor guy. But one discussion I remember was Mom saying that the TV show Lost in Space was too scary for us to watch. We loved that show. Dad said he thought it was okay, and he won that one. So every Wednesday night at 7, we got to watch it. Score, thanks Dad. Some random things about Dad. In the late 70s, when Happy Days was a hit show, some of Dad's students started calling him Fonzie because his hair was long and slicked back, and he was cool and very handsome. When I worked at Baskin Robbins, Dad would always come pick me up at 9:30 until I got my driver's license. He wouldn't let anyone else drive me. On the day that I turned 16, he took me down to get my license. He was in no rush. It was me that insisted. But he still continued to pick me up from work late at night because he didn't want me driving alone at that time of night. I didn't really understand or appreciate it at the time until I became a parent myself. He was a great dad in so many ways. We would take road trips every June before music camp started in July. Dad would play games with us in the car, like how many miles to the next thing coming up on the horizon. Chuck was very competitive and loved to win whatever the game was. He liked the license plate game a lot, and usually won. Then Dad would razz Chuck, like, did you really see that license plate from Maine? I didn't see it. They would pretend to argue for 10 minutes. Boys are so fun. I love boys. I loved our trips. No running around for different obligations in separate directions. Just family time in the car. And no cell phones at that time. Everyone's nose buried in their phone. Family time with no technology. What a concept. I miss you, Dad. And then I'm going to speak as his granddaughter. growing up in Flagstaff, I felt like royalty. Like, I didn't really understand at that time, like, who my grandpa was, but man, I just knew that everyone knew him, and I was just like, oh yeah, I'm just like so cool right now. So that's my life growing up. When I was in Flag as a little kid, I just felt like royalty, like, you know, I deserve everything. But my grandpa, I knew him a little bit different than you guys, obviously, because he was retired, and it's so cool to hear the story. And I can't wait for you guys to share any stories you have, because I never really knew my grandpa that way, so it's been super cool. But he was a chauffeur, a messy one that always had corn nut powder on his pants. He was a computer tech that taught me how to also be computer savvy and play Minesweeper and Solitaire. He was my personal flute tutor. He was a handyman, Chuck has mentioned, and a great motivator. He bribed me $20 to learn how to tie my shoes when I was young. And I just want to confirm with you former students, oh my gosh, he loved you guys. There's literally boxes upon boxes upon boxes of letters and notes that you guys wrote as kids, little goofy awards you guys made him. Like, he still cherished those and had them in boxes and never got rid of them. So he really loved you guys well.
It's wrong. Yeah, some of them are out in the lobby. Thank you, Marilyn.
Down. Here we go. Whoa. There it is. Now what?
Go up.
Up it goes. Here we go. Up we go. Up, 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 up to the top, to right. Here. We're up.